My name's Mark Ludlow from the Australian Financial Review. I'll be co-MC for this event. Our speaker today is Dr. Anthony Lynham, who's the Minister for Natural Resources, Mines and Energy. He's across a couple of big portfolios there. Before entering Parliament as the member for Brisbane's seat of Stafford in 2014, Dr. Lynham worked as a maxillofacial surgeon, which I'm sure you all know. Today he's here to address the Queensland Media Club about the future for the resources and energy sector in Queensland. Can you please welcome him to the stage?
Thank you very much, Mark. As always, as we stand in footsteps of millennia old, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land which we gather today and pay my due respects to elders past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues, Jen Howard, Assistant Minister of State and Member for Ipswich, Chris Whiting, Member for Bancroft and Chair of the State Development, Natural Resources and Agricultural Industry Development Parliamentary Committee, Jim Madden, Member for Ipswich West, Bart Mellish, my neighbour and Member for Aspley, Margaret Strello, Mayor, Rockhampton, Stephen Smythe, Queensland District President of the CFMEU, members of the Parliamentary Media Gallery, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation to address the Queensland Media Club. Now, traditionally, as you all know, every workday on a mine starts with a safety reset.
Police have confirmed a man has died in a workplace accident at Fairfield Quarry near Claremont.
Connor Milne died after suffering critical head and leg injuries in a machinery accident at Wolfang near Claremont yesterday.
A Queensland mine has been shut down after a worker died and 10 others were injured in an underground collision.
47-year-old father, Bradley Hardwick, died after the grader he was driving collided with another vehicle.
55-year-old Mackay man David Routledge became trapped in an excavator when a high wall collapsed at the open cut mine just before 1 yesterday afternoon.
The construction union wants all Queensland coal mine sites shut down following the death of a worker.
A man has been killed at a coal mine in central Queensland, the second mining death in 2 weeks, sparking huge concerns for the safety of workers in the industry.
I think the industry needs to take a step back, have a deep breath and look at where it's going.
We need to establish what more can be done. Safety isn't just words, it's actions, it's the top priority.
We should look after each other. Look after each other, look after ourselves. Somebody wants you to go home tonight. Mum, dad, wife, kids. Somebody wants you to go home, and it's important you go home safely.
Now, that video is currently being played at every mine site and every quarry around the state. That video is only a small part of the statewide safety reset. It's a crucial first step in refocusing attention on what should be everyone's number one priority, because it's everyone's right to return home after work. As of last week, more than 11,000 workers, union and management reps have taken part in safety resets at nearly 250 mines and quarries across this state over the past 5 weeks. Now, I've been to 2 of these safety resets myself, and it's been very powerful to see that workers, union and management have come together to reflect on the 6 lives lost in the past year. The interaction is phenomenal, and to hear the personal stories, the 2 that I went to, the personal stories of safety issues, the things that have come so close and also so many years ago, is extremely profound. I'd like to acknowledge the joint effort by the mining and quarrying industry's peak bodies, the unions and the individual companies in activating this reset and committing to further discussions on measures including industrial manslaughter. If I may turn to the topic of your invitations for today, the future of resources. Now let's set the scene. On our government watch, there have been more than $20 billion worth of new investment in resources. Now, since Anastasia Palaszczuk became Premier, more than 200,000 jobs have been created across the Queensland economy. 7,000 jobs, the resources industry, of the 200,000 that we created in this state. 20%, nearly 20% of those jobs in the resources sector held by women. 4% of those jobs held by Indigenous employees. And the latest international trade data shows the value of coal and mineral exports up by over 13% on the previous year, and LNG up by more than 40%. You've always heard us talk and spruik about Queensland exports. Well, in no small way it's due to the resources sector, a valuable contributor to exports for this entire nation. But what does the future hold? Demand for our resources will continue to grow, driven by global population growth. Demand for metallurgical coal will stay with us as big customers like India and China continue to need steel. We will have a strong coal export industry for years to come. The world needs our met coal. And I'd just like to point out that also, federally, the Greens Party platform allows for open-cut mining for metallurgical coal, something I think they probably didn't realise when they were here in the room. There's also growing demand for minerals of the future. Scandium, cobalt and rare earths, as well as emerging high-tech uses for traditional metals like nickel, copper, bauxite. Aluminium, for instance, is showing a lot of potential as an ingredient to efficiently produce hydrogen. But some of these traditional resources will get harder to find and mine. We're looking at a picture of cobalt there from the Scone mine, the old Greenvale nickel mine. And let's look at copper. Now, humans have been mining copper since the Bronze Age. All the easy to find, easy to mine copper has been found and mined. The challenge is what is left is deeper and therefore more difficult to find, difficult to mine. In the industry, it's called resources scarcity. Now, I remember when I first come into this job, I forget where the conference was, but I had to open a conference for geologists. And I was only going to be there a short time. I opened the conference, but I said to myself, I just want to stay for the first talk. I stayed for the first talk, the second talk, the third talk. I had to cancel my appointments after that. It was absolutely fascinating. And one of the topics they talked about was how deep the minerals are in Queensland. In Queensland, we are simply scratching the surface compared to what the world is doing. The new frontier for exploration and resources in Queensland will be deeper, as it is in the rest of the world. And they put up a graph, and I couldn't find the graph. I'd love to show you how deep Queensland mines are and how deep our exploration has gone compared to the rest of the world. And don't forget, we have that huge sedimentary cap where Mount Isa pokes through. But we know there are pipe structures under that sedimentary cap. There's 9 of them in Queensland, deeper. And we're exploring them now. And that's where the new frontier will be. We've explored the surface. We just have to go deeper. Now, as part of the Northwest Minerals Strategic Blueprint, we're using these new developments in geophys to explore at greater depths. And we're developing a deposit atlas that brings together all known geological information to increase industry's chances to find those deeper deposits. Now, customers are being driven to seek security of supply, whether it's at an international level, between trading partners, or at a customer level. And this is already starting and will particularly be the case for strategic minerals. For instance, minerals critical to military development. And that's the new Boxer vehicle that will soon be produced next year. It'll start production at a factory in Ipswich. And munitions will start production at a factory in Maryborough. And this is where strategic minerals will be directly used here in Queensland for military development. And at a government level, Queensland's facilitate that security by entering into agreements or alliances such as we have with Japan and Korea and the USA, or just last year with India. Now, Trade Investment Queensland continues to market and promote Queensland as the preferred investment destination. In fact, TIQ has appointed a new Global Investment Commissioner, Mr. Ross Buchanan, who will lead an expanded network of offshore investment specialists to drive new investment into Queensland. And Mr. Buchanan has been Queensland's Trade and Investment Commissioner to Japan and has worked in the infrastructure, resources and energy sectors. And just this month, we've seen an example of resources security seeking at project level. Now, a South Korean company, SK Innovation, has an offtake agreement with Australian mines for supply of cobalt and nickel, obviously essential battery materials. Now, SK Innovation, it's 150 kilometres south of Seoul, and it used to be Korea Petroleum, but it's diversified into batteries, energy, refineries, and it's come on board early. That's invested in a project that's still in development. And that's a buyer securing supply at the beginning, at the source. But it also reflects the current lack of diversity and depth supply for many of our new technology minerals. There's nothing really but opportunity here in Queensland for those minerals. We can potentially supply the diversity and security of supply that many countries need for their critical minerals. The challenge is to attract that initial investment to those supply chains. So if you take rare earths like cobalt, demand is forecast to increase in association with developing technologies. Now, these minerals are needed for production of fuel cells, mobile phones, superconductors and hybrid vehicle batteries. Now, China, as we all know, is the world's dominant rare earth supplier. Queensland's opportunity is to position itself now as a source of ethically produced rare earths, which leads me to the other emerging trend, and that is the extra dimension to the well-worn triple bottom line. Now, everyone's been talking for a while about the need to balance society, planet and profit. We had our own little example here just a short time ago. Now, social licence is becoming just as important as profit. Social licence allows the resources sector to grow. Now, social licence is not transferable in the positive, but it's widely translated in the negative. I'll say that again. It's not transferable in the positive, but it's widely translated in the negative. And that means that if we have some of the best rehab in the world, as I have seen as the Resources Minister, it's hard to convince others that that's the norm for industry. No one looks at that, oh, isn't that a greatly rehab mine except for me and you. But if we have something that's terrible rehabilitation, everyone will know about it. Everyone will know about it. I know it's not fair, but that's the world we live in with social licence. Now, there's no doubt that this is driven by increased scrutiny from increasingly aware global citizens. They're either informed or armed or both, depending on your perspective, by Google and social media. And as I said before, after the interlude, sometimes their perceptions are far from real. Queensland has robust frameworks to face this scrutiny, whether it's environmental, safety or corporate governance. It's a point I need to make with the Morrison federal government launching into its Productivity Commission inquiry into resources regulation. And that point is that regulation helps us protect the industry's social licence. Now, this is the Financial Assurance Bill, the Financial Provisioning Act, which is a very important piece of legislation, as you all know, because it consolidates rehabilitation in the mining sector and puts money aside to rehabilitate mines, which gives us social licence. And we will see, with this Act and the money set aside, more comprehensive rehabilitation in the future, again, with your help. Now that is protecting 68,000 jobs in this sector. It's protecting the royalties that help fund our teachers, our nurses, our police officers. And for that and other reasons, our government will continue to maintain our strong environmental protection standards. We will support for the community's right to have a voice, and we'll also continue our reforms to financial insurance. This is in fact an investment strategy so that Queensland can differentiate itself from other resource investment destinations. We will do it right. We will employ, ethically mine, we will rehabilitate. We need to play to our existing strengths, and that's our resources, our skilled workforce, our world-class infrastructure, our research sector, our industry capability. But we should absolutely be playing to the emerging trends: ethical supply, security supply, environment and social governance credentials. That's the future for our resource sector. Like here, that's the Condamine QGL pipeline that was under the Condamine River back in 2013, and that's the initial rehab. Great rehab. Now, may I turn briefly to another topical part of my portfolio, and that's energy. Just last week, I was with the Premier opening the Mount Emerald wind farm. As Jennifer Hewitt wrote in the Australian Financial Review last week, the transition to renewables is inevitable and it's underway. And yet, at a national level, the federal government doesn't know how Australia will meet its energy needs next year, let alone in a decade. We currently have a party, federally, that is discussing new coal-fired power stations and nuclear energy. That's Chernobyl. I know it's a cheap shot. Sorry, I'll get Chernobyl off. Oh, sorry, that's Fukushima. I'm sorry about that. Australia's chief scientist made it quite clear 2 years ago that coal-fired power stations would struggle to be competitive. By the time we had a nuclear-fired power station, we would be a generation older. Our technologies would have advanced out of sight. That is a fuel cell, uses hydrogen, and will be utilised by Northern Oil in Gladstone to power its biorefinery. The pressing energy policy discussion should now be how, not what, not coal versus solar, but how governments and industry manage the transition effectively. Queensland has more than 2,900 megawatts of large-scale renewable energy capacity already. Another 360 megawatts of large-scale renewable capacity is currently financially committed or under construction. That's the GenX project at Kidston. And these projects represent more than $5 billion in capital investment and more than 4,700 construction jobs in regional Queensland. So let's move away from the 20th century debate and think and plan in the policy development space that our government is in, way ahead of the Morrison government in Canberra and our opposition here in Queensland. Sadly for all Australians, our national government is wasting time and energy on big stick electricity laws and gas market interventions that only succeed in killing investment. At a state level, we can only adjust the levers that we hold. But all I can say is thank God for federalism and Queenslanders' passion for public ownership of their own assets. In New South Wales, we have the unsightly spectacle of cabinet ministers pleading with the private sector not to shut down their baseload coal-fired power stations like Liddell. It's not an issue here. It's never an issue here under a state Labor government. Public ownership has allowed us to tackle the short to medium issues around increasing generation and placing downward pressure on pricing. I love showing these slides to show that we have the lowest power prices on the eastern seaboard. We've been able to make rooftop solar and batteries accessible to households who tend to miss out, and also to renters and low-income families. By making batteries more accessible to more Queenslanders, we are fostering an emerging battery manufacturing industry. And just this morning, I read from 2015 to now, battery prices have decreased by 40%. 40% decrease from 2015 in battery prices, making them much more affordable. My colleague Mark Bailey, as Energy Minister, at the time gave Stanwell Corp a direction about its marketplace bidding. Now you take that, if we didn't have Stanwell and public asset, there wouldn't be much chance of that happening if Stanwell was owned by a private company. And by that bidding direction, we lowered power prices for all Queensland families. We've established our third generator, CleanCo, to increase competition and drive renewables right in line with the recommendations of the Australian Consumer and Competition Commission. And what about the issues tied to our inevitable transition to renewables? Well, that's for another day. But I need to end with one final observation. We need the federal government to stop leaving it to the Palaszczuk government to do the heavy lifting. The problem with the Morrison government's approach is they have their blinkers on. For Scott Morrison, Matt Canavan and Angus Taylor, it's all about coal, it's about uranium, it's all about no energy policy. And we've made it abundantly clear that Queensland has a strong future when it comes to coal. Look at new projects that have gained coordinated approval, like Olive Downs, and thousands of jobs in the Bowen Basin. And as I mentioned earlier, we're also looking for new minerals like scandium, palladium and cobalt, just to name a few, because that means new industries. And new industries mean new jobs for the future of Queensland. If Scott Morrison could take his blinkers off, give the nation certainty through a coherent energy policy, actually just any energy policy would do. You can't take two recommendations from an ACCC report and call that energy policy. And if he could think about minerals of the future, he could think about long-term planning for the gas industry, imagine how many new jobs that we could work together for Queensland. Instead, it's a battle. But we could be working together with the federal government if only they would take their blinkers off. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. There was a bit of an excitement for a Queensland Media Club lunch. At least it's guaranteed you'll get in the 6 o'clock news tonight, so I guess there's got to be some plus. Your media advisors will be happy with that. Now, I've got a couple of questions for you before we throw to the other members of the media gallery. There's no questions from the floor, unfortunately, so it's hopefully...
Did you get they spelt my name right too, I think.
Did they? Oh, that's right, yeah. Look, I wasn't going to ask about Adani, but obviously, but now that the protesters have brought it up, you did mention in your speech about social licence, though, and there has been a lot of debate, and I'm always quite amused by the debate that's been going on about Adani one mine in Queensland, not focusing on other coal mines that may be approved or expanded in the Bowen Basin, just focusing on one mine. It's a lot easier for opponents to the Adani mine to focus on one mine. But do you believe in this debate? And let's be honest, there has been opposition to the Adani mine throughout Australia. Do you think some of that social licence has been lost specifically over that issue?
Look, I'm glad to talk about the Adani mine. I don't shirk talking about the Adani mine in my electorate or any electorate, and I've been to many meetings talking about this issue. Social licence is vitally important, and as I said before in my speech, if we have one bad example of social licence being abrogated, that'll be used forever. And I'm very pleased that the sector that I'm Minister for takes that very, very seriously. In every meeting in my boardroom, every meeting I've had with people from the sector, that is foremost, because it's essential for our sustainability, our survivability here in Queensland. It's essential that we do have strong social licence. But the Adani issue, it's a name now. It's an absolute name. It is not the biggest mine in the world. It is not the biggest mine in Australia. It's not even the biggest mine in Queensland. It's 10 million tonnes per annum. The biggest mine is in Wyoming, 130 million tonnes per annum. The world mines 8,000 million tonnes of coal per year. Adani's 10. You stop Adani, and people have said this, you know, they use different analogies. But if you stop Adani, it's a market-driven analysis. It's like buying anything you want on a market. If you stop Adani, the market will supply. And there's mines ready to go in Mozambique, in Indonesia, in North South Africa. There are mines ready to go. So, sure, have the protest and say, look, I want to try to stop 10 million tonnes per annum in a world that burns 8,000 million tonnes of coal. People forget that Queensland only exports 200 million tonnes of coal. Only 60 million tonnes of that is thermal coal. Now, my staff call me a bit strange because I love figures, you can just hear. But the figures are significant. The export that we only export 200 million tonnes of coal out of 8,000 million tonnes burnt, because the export trade in coal is small. It's important to us, it means a lot for us. But worldwide it is tiny. And the reason for that, Mark, is that coal is so common. It's in everyone's backyard. People just dig it up. China digs up 4,000 million tonnes of coal in its own backyard. So climate change must be addressed through world initiatives, such as the Paris Accord. Sure, tighten the Paris Accord. Get every country on board. That's where it's important. You know, 200 million tonnes, only 60 million tonnes is thermal. We're a blip. Now, those protesters that you saw regarding Adani, that word Adani now has just become synonymous with battling climate change.
Just one more quick one on Adani. Obviously, there was a big build-up into the final approvals for that mine. Obviously, it happened fairly quickly after the federal election. But are you concerned that the anti-Adani protests continue on, and you've seen people out on site there chaining themselves to earth-moving equipment? Are you concerned about there doesn't seem to be any let-up in the protests against Adani? And will that have any broader implications, say, ahead of the state election next year?
Look, I get concerned. As I said before, if you look at the Greens Party platform federally, they allow open-cut mining for metallurgical coal. And I look at the people who chain themselves to railway tracks, and they've, especially in the Bowen Basin, they've stopped metallurgical coal trains getting to ports. Yeah, that's what they're chaining themselves up to. They don't understand. I think if I asked them the question of what the difference was between the two types of coal, they wouldn't be able to tell me. And so they forget that the majority of Queensland's coal exports is metallurgical coal. And we will have a coal industry for years to come. There's us, Mongolia, and some in Virginia. And that's it for high-grade met coal. So we will have coal industry forever. Regarding Adani, it was important because that mine, really people have grasped onto that. That's the nameplate for climate change is Adani. It's important that we were very, very careful to make sure that mine had social licence. And that's why there are 230 environmental approvals for that mine. And what you witnessed before the federal election campaign was a final 2 of those hurdles. Very important hurdles, like the springs and also the black-throated finch. And they're important for Adani as well, unless they were appropriately addressed. You imagine if that mine started and there was an effect on the springs. You just can't let that happen. Because if it did happen, As I said before, it's negative for all of us in the room. All of us. So we're just as careful with that mine as with every mine to make sure that no other resource company in Australia, in Queensland, is labelled with that same burden. You have to be very, very careful with your environmental approvals. You have to be careful. On Adani, it was black-throated finch and the Springs. And we had to be absolutely sure that we could hold our head up high and say the resources sector looks after the environment. The resources sector is here to stay.
Just one more quick one before I throw to my colleagues. Obviously, in the energy space, there's been a lot of focus on Queensland and Victoria, who have very ambitious renewable energy targets. They're pursuing those targets in the absence of any national policy on that front. Queensland's got a history, as opposed to Victoria, or has some coal, but Queensland's got a very coal-rich state. There are coal-fired generators here, most of whom are owned by the state government. You've spoken in the past about how coal can coexist with renewables. Do you believe, though, as you get more and more renewables into the system, that those coal-fired power stations, which are owned by the government, will become less profitable and they might be squeezed out of the market sooner than they would have been?
Mark, that's the value of public ownership, is that we own those coal-fired power stations. And a transition from total coal-fired power to renewable power, 50% renewable by 2030, has to be carefully managed. And that's why it's only a Labor government here in Queensland, and I don't like to be parochial political, but a Labor government here in Queensland is the only government that can do this, 50% by 2030. You take the LNP, no way. We're not going to have renewable power, 50% renewable power by 2030. It's not on their agenda. They had a renewable policy, I think it lasted 0.6 of a millisecond, as Deb Frecklington announced it, and Tim Mander shouted it down. It lasted 0.6 of a millisecond, their renewable energy policy. If you had the Greens in charge, you have 100% renewable tomorrow, and you'd have, I don't know what you'd have, but the population of Queensland would not want that to continue. So the only possible government to get to 50% renewable is a Palaszczuk Labor government. And the way we get there is to have control, a transition, a smooth pathway with no major price increases, reliability, and that smooth transition, that smooth path. And as I told you, I want to get to 2030 where people are sitting around the dinner table and no one notices that we got to 50% renewable energy, because they haven't seen their power bill go up. They've seen reliable power every summer, and we're at 50% renewable. And that's how we can get there without anyone noticing. Safe, sure, steady hands on the lever to make sure we can address climate change appropriately.
Just quickly, if we get back to the original question, do you believe that the coal-fired power will be squeezed out of the market quicker? And is that, if it becomes obviously less profitable if there's more and more renewables, you can wear that because they are state-owned?
They're state-owned, and it won't be before 2030. We had the Renewable Energy Task Force look at that back in 2016, and we will need all our coal-fired generation to keep going to 2030. Beyond 2030, things change, and 10 years change. We might have a federal government, might have some energy policy, because at the present time, we are doing the heavy lifting, both Victoria and Queensland, South Australia, previously with the Labor government there. But with the federal government, you take some of our initiatives, like the Renewables 400 initiative, it's like trying to hit a moving target with the federal government. You just don't know where they're going to sit. And it's hard. Without certainty, it's hard for state governments. And you have to talk to the energy companies. They scream for certainty with the federal government because they don't know which way they have to turn. And that stifles investment. And really, the way to increase supply, the way to decrease prices and have increased reliability is to increase supply of electricity. No one's going to invest when you've got a federal government that doesn't know whether it's Arthur or Martha. And you can't take, literally they've got 56 recommendations from Rod Sims with his ACCC report. They've taken 2 of those recommendations and they've called it a national energy policy. And it just can't continue. We have the Affordable Energy Plan here. We've had that since DOT, and we've stuck to it Energy companies know what we're doing, they know where we're investing, they know where the Queensland government is, and that's why they love to come to Queensland. It's pity we couldn't just have a plan federally. Just a plan. Give us something. Don't just swing from uranium to coal to divestment legislation to underwriting something here and underwriting something there, then the next day it changes. You know, what company is going to invest in that environment? We need more supply to bring down cost, to increase reliability, and we won't get that with Morrison.
Look, I've got plenty more energy questions here, but I might throw to my colleagues on the media table who might have a few questions for you. If you could just stand up and say where you're from, that'd be great.
Is it on? I'm Dominique from the Courier Mail.
You promised you wouldn't let Dominique have the mic. What's going on?
First I've heard of that. Should the state's trespass laws that were brought in earlier this year to protect farmers also be extended to the mining industry?
Oh, thanks, Dominique. That's a great question. Look, anyone interfering with anyone's right to go about their daily work, I disagree with. Everyone should have the right to protest, as I said in my speech, but it has to be done in a respectful manner. There are many mechanisms to protest without interfering with another person's daily life. What I fret about and worry about in the mining industry is safety. A coal train takes, I think it's 2 kilometres to stop a train. And I fear for safety of protesters. I really do. They have to realise that this industry has a lot of heavy machinery, and that's where I really worry about. In farming and agriculture, I worry about biosecurity, what goes on to a farm. In mining, I worry about safety, not only for the protesters, but also for the train drivers or truck drivers that may be there. Safety is paramount, and you saw the emphasis of my talk regarding mining health and safety. And that's where I stand, and they should not protest anywhere near a rail line, anywhere near the vehicles that are used in mining. They should keep off mine sites for their own health and safety.
Minister Josh Babbis from ABC. The MRV mine, the former Texas silver mine, the Environment Department has issued a few notices over leaks there, contaminant leaks. Are you aware of that? And what's being done to fix that? And are you concerned about ongoing issues at that site?
Thanks, Josh. The site's been taken over by Morton Resources. It's a silver mine near Texas. It's been issued with an environmental protection order by the Department of Environment. I'm hesitant to comment because it's in the courts, but I do know the area really well, and my sons and I go there all the time and chase Murray cod on the Demerrick. It's a fantastic river system. I know the area well, but they have been issued an EPO. And we await the, I think it's under appeal at the moment, and we await the court's decision.
Minister Felicity Caldwell from Brisbane Times. Now that the Adani mine's been approved, how quickly do you think the other half a dozen mines in the Galilee Basin could be approved and start work?
Well, the Adani mine's the first one to get off the ground. The other mines are all in various states of approval. One of the issues is the rail line, because Adani is now using the Horizon network with a spur off the Horizon network, and that network is almost at capacity. So it'd be very difficult to see the other mines stepping up when you've got a network that's almost at capacity, but Horizon can advise further on that. But the other mines are going through their normal approval processes.
Minister, Ebony Cavallaro from Channel 9. Look, as we look towards the next election, there's a lot of marginal seats in Queensland. Are you concerned that Jackie Tradd's integrity crisis may cost the government at the next election?
Jackie Tradd's been Jackie's been wonderful to this industry, especially in mine health and safety, and I have to give credit where credit's due. Like the resources for the van, the pneumoconiosis prevention van, that came from Jackie. A lot of the mine health and safety initiatives, Jackie was quick off the mark in helping miners stay safe, especially in pneumoconiosis and other mine lung dust diseases. Jackie, presently, as the Premier said, it's before the CCC. I've little to add apart from that, Ebony.
back to me again. So is the government open to extending those trespass laws that are being imposed, on activists at farms?
Look, my opinion is that we have very strong laws at the present time. We not only have on-the-spot fines, but also we have the possibility of those people serving prison terms. The laws are strong at the present time, but I'd just like to make an appeal to please, safety is so important. Protesting near rail lines where a coal train takes over 2 kilometres to stop is just so important. Don't put your lives in jeopardy.
I might just finish up with one or two more quick ones. There's a lot of the problem with Australia's federal system is there's always constant bickering between the federal government of one political stripe and the state governments of another. I know, so there's some of which is part of the normal argy-bargy. If you and other states are so concerned about the lack of a coherent national energy policy, why don't you guys go it alone? You're on the COAG Energy Council. Can't you form a band with some other states who want to get on board and do it yourself?
We can, but there's certain limitations to what we can do, and they're quite technical limitations, and I've sought advice as to how far states can go in order to convene a meeting ourselves.
And what does that advice say? Can you tell us about that now?
There are certain complicating factors, but states can. Technically, states can. States can form a meeting, a COAG meeting, but as you said, there's bickering. I'd rather not have that bickering. The South Australian, my compatriot in South Australia, has come out like me and said that let's have some cooperation. Let's work together with the federal government. I've tried that. I've tried working very hard. It's very difficult to work with the federal government.
Have you had a conversation with Angus Taylor yet since the federal election?
I sent him a text and got a text back. Before that, I've tried to contact him personally with no response. Josh Frydenberg was before Angus Taylor, and I can tell you that the conversation with Josh Frydenberg regarding the NEG was open, it was constant, we were always on the phone together. That's the way I like to see it. And I have a good relationship with my federal colleagues about that. I have a good relationship with David Littleproud, a good relationship with Matt Canavan. We disagree. Many things, if not everything, we disagree. But we have a fantastic relationship that we can get on the phone and talk. And Josh Frydenberg, in regard to the NEG, and how disappointed are we with that? How disappointed is Malcolm Turnbull that the NEG didn't work either? But we worked together, and we had meetings. I'd go down to Canberra, he'd come up to here, we'd have dinner together, we'd work it out. We'd work out how we could work this for the betterment of every Queensland family, every Australian family. And as you know, Federal Labor were taking the NEG into the election. They were going to bring on the NEG, exactly the position that I negotiated with Josh Frydenberg. But those conversations now have stopped. My phone is there, he's got my number, I've tried, I've put out the hand of friendship. I want to work cooperatively with the federal government to make sure I can drop energy prices here in Queensland. Other states, they've got reliability issues. My driver is price.
What did Angus say in his text? Did he say wrong number or?
No. He didn't say that, but I do hope this stimulates some dialogue because it's sadly lacking federally. I pick up the phone to my colleagues. I'm always talking to Lily in Victoria about how we can improve things, how we can work together to make energy cheaper and more reliable. And I'm willing to have the conversation with the Federal Energy Minister. Sincerely, I want to have energy prices low here in Queensland for Queensland families. That's what I'm working towards.
I'll put in a good word next time we have a chat. Just one final question. Obviously, with the move to 50% renewable energy target, a lot of these large-scale solar projects look to have power purchase agreements, either signed, with the government help underwriting it or with a corporate to be able to get the finance to go ahead. It's a pretty competitive market out there. I think there's 90 projects across Australia who are either underway or looking to get underway. There's been a move recently with there's been so competitive in that market to get PPAs that a lot of these solar projects are just rolling the dice and funding it themselves, and it will be at the whim of the spot market. Are you concerned with so many large-scale projects coming in, some of which aren't being underwritten by power purchase agreements, that there could be some stranded assets down the track?
Well, I'm pleased that they're building the projects themselves because there's this myth going around about all these subsidies given to these projects. And yet we hear there's billions of dollars subsidies to get a coal-fired power station up running. I don't know. The underwriting for a coal-fired power station would be phenomenal to make that profitable. But solar and wind power is cheap, and they're willing to compete on the market based on price alone. And it's great to see that we're getting build of these projects de novo on the market and will compete on price alone. And they will. And as I said before, you know, we can get wind. Strike price for wind, $44 a megawatt hour. Strike price for solar, just over $50 a megawatt hour. New coal, $120 a megawatt hour. Nuclear, $200 a megawatt hour. So you'd have to underwrite coal and nuclear phenomenally. But with wind and solar, they can compete on an open market to keep prices low. And we're hungry for power. So I don't think you'll see stranded assets. I think we need more supply. I think they're valuable resources being built for the energy network.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, can you please thank Minister Lynham? I'll just get the Minister to stay up here for 2 seconds longer. He gets to draw the Lucky Door Prize. I think there's some business cards coming up. The winner of this is for the Civil Contractors Federation bottle of Henschke, and he's pulling out the winner now. The winner of the bottle of Henschke is it Libby Beath from New Hope Group. Oh, well. Thanks very much. Okay, thank you. Thanks again to Minister Lynham. The next event will be on the 10th of September. It's a panel discussion with the CEOs and the artistic directors of Queensland's key cultural institutions, which is Queensland Theatre, Queensland Art Gallery, Queensland Ballet, Opera Queensland, the Queensland Symphony Orchestra and QPAC. On the role of arts and culture in New World City. We hope to see you there. Once again, I'd like to acknowledge our naming right partners, Brisbane Airports Corporation, Civil Contractors Federation, Queensland and Griffith Uni, as well as our other event partners. Thanks again for coming today.